My parents always exposed me and my sister to people from different cultures. Language teachers, they always enjoyed travelling and going overseas, and indeed many of their friends were people from different cultures. I thus grew up with a very open mind towards people from different backgrounds, different nationalities, and indeed people around me. However, I quickly realised when I was at school that not everybody had been given the same openness. A boy named Vishal came to our class at primary school. He's from Asia. I don't know why, but all the other kids in the class didn't like him. Nothing he could do was right. They picked on him, they were cruel to him, used to steal his bags, steal his books, and just say terrible things about him. And I made friends with him, and thus then they didn't like me either. But it's my first encounter with real prejudice against someone because they were different. But as I've reflected on it, as time has gone by, I've realised that children must have absorbed this, the children in our class at primary school must have absorbed this from their background, from their values at home or in the wider culture. The second time I really became aware of the way in which people relate to people who are different from them was when I got married. My wife is from Ghana, and she came to Leicestershire, the centre of the universe, and everywhere we went, people were staring at her. We went around the supermarket and everybody was looking at her. And she didn't really feel very comfortable with this. It was very clear that people were not reacting to her in a normal way. She and I obviously were creating reactions that were not ones I'd perceived before. And I became aware of an implicit discrimination and prejudice. Everywhere we were going, I noticed things I'd never noticed before about Britain. And sometimes it's unconscious. And I didn't really know how much of a problem it is until my wife and I started comparing notes after all these experiences. And she told me a lot of other things as well.
So years ago, I signed up as a student at the college, and I was very excited about it. And I remember the first day when I showed up. I remember being led into a huge hall where everybody else was sitting and waiting. And I joined the queue, and when it got to my turn, there was a slight panic, and a kind of 10-minute conversation went on in the corner about me. And it looked like they were surprised to see me, which I couldn't quite understand, because I'd got a message saying I should show up because it was a day to sign up, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was. So somewhere towards the end of this frantic conversation, which was going on about me, I wasn't included in that conversation, but I could hear everything. Somebody said, "Well, why don't we just give her a chance and see what happens?" During my first week, I was told that I had been signed up for an English class. They didn't think that I could speak English and write in English, and they weren't quite sure that I could undertake this course of study because a high level of English was required. I remember thinking that I would have really appreciated it if somebody had had a conversation with me in order to discover whether I could speak English or not. But anyway, it didn't matter. So I remember the first day I met my private tutor who was very warm and really welcoming, and gave me the first 10 minutes to talk about myself. So at the end of the 10 minutes, the tutor looked at me and said, "I'm not quite sure why you're here." She said, in her opinion, I was quite fluent in English, and so she didn't think I needed to be there. And in the end, she said to me, "Look, we have got to produce something that shows that you are fluent in English and competent, that you can write very well in English, and that you can communicate meaningfully in English." So she asked me to bring some of my work. She was going to use them for a kind of assessment. So I did. And, well, let's just say that I got signed off the English course quite quickly. After about a month or two, I was assessed, and the people in charge of this place that I'd gone to do this particular course I was very interested in, came to the conclusion that I was very capable, and they thought I didn't have any problems with English, and they thought I was also good enough to do the course that I'd chosen to study. But I have to say that it was quite crushing. I did not talk to anyone about this experience. I didn't ever talk about it. They could have had a conversation with me and taken a good look at my past academic record to discover whether I could communicate in English and write in English, But I suppose that is how sometimes things happen. We do not take our time to dialogue with people. We do not give ourselves time to get to know people before we make our conclusions about who they are and what they can do and what they can't do. But I also think that it was good that I experienced that, because it has helped me to understand what other people go through when they come from other countries into Europe to study or to work, and indeed with my work right now, I meet a lot of people who have been through similar experiences.
Racism can be unconscious. We can implicitly hold prejudice about a number of things, but it's very dangerous to be unaware of these implicit assumptions about race. We must be very careful to examine ourselves, and sometimes we may not even know that we have assumptions or unconscious bias against people from different backgrounds. But if we do discover these things within ourselves, it's very important that we pray about them and challenge them. I was once going to South Africa, and I was in the airport having my breakfast in Johannesburg, and a lady and her son, the lady would be about 80, and her son would be older than me, of course. They sat with us, and sat with me. I was on my own. A lady who'd grown up in Zimbabwe, and her son sat with me and asked if they could join me. I was sat alone. She started complaining about Zimbabwe, which she refused to call Zimbabwe. She started complaining about how things had developed in Zimbabwe, and then extended this to South Africa and said that since 1994, South Africa was terrible and everything was bad. And her assumption was that it was only under white leadership that Zimbabwe or South Africa were any good. She then said, and I don't believe people from different races or cultures should get married. They shouldn't mix. I must say I got indigestion during this time of breakfast because I was so annoyed with what she was saying. But because she was older than me, I didn't want to just shout her down. And I didn't really know how to begin to challenge assumptions, racist assumptions that if she had grown up in white-led Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia as she wanted to call it, she would have absorbed many of these racist ideas at school. And so I didn't know how to begin to bring to her a realization that these were not good. The things she was saying were not good. But then, as she said, she didn't believe people from different countries or different cultures, different races, should marry. I had an idea. I showed her a picture of my family, of my children. I said, "Would you like to see a picture of my family?" And she said, "Oh, yes," she said. I showed her. I said, "Aren't my children beautiful?" She said, "My goodness, yes, they are." And I said, "Do you really believe that people from different countries or continents or races shouldn't mix? Because if you do, you're contradicting the fact that you believe they're beautiful." She started to cry. She started to cry and tell me I must think she was awful. And I said, "No," I said, "I think you've been raised in a racist environment. You've been taught to believe things that are simply untrue. And I challenge you now to reevaluate the assumptions you've been given and revisit them." Sometimes people can be unconsciously racist. They can be unconsciously biased. And it's very important that we challenge these things. When partnering with churches overseas, when relating to people from different countries and cultures, we may discover sometimes these biases. And maybe it will shock us to discover some things about ourselves and what we think. But it's very important that if we discover racial bias within ourselves, that we confess it to God and ask God to help us change. It's very, very important that we don't ignore these unconscious things, but bring them out and challenge them within ourselves. If we don't, it'll be impossible to relate to others as equals, impossible to partner with churches overseas on an equal footing. If we hold unconscious ideas of superiority, it will ruin the partnerships we seek to forge. I thus encourage you to ensure that when you do partner with churches overseas, you ensure that you always seek to be equal partners, working together for the glory of God.